All right, everybody's flowing in here, just kind of waiting for everyone to join. Um, Thank you all for taking the time today. I still see the number flowing in terms of participants. Um, but yeah, we'll kick off here in just a couple minutes once I see that number stop ticking up here. Um, but thank you all for taking the time. Happy tax season. We're into February already. Very exciting time of year. It's go time. Um, And yeah, I'm Dave Hayes, the founder of Juno. I'm here with my co-founder, Jack Flitcroft. Um, yeah, this is something we started in a garage 2 years and change ago now. And, the hope and a dream of doing something better than what our uh, current state of our technology was at the time. Jack actually didn't believe me at first that our technology was as bad as I was describing. He was like, I need to watch you do data entry for a tax return before I even. He's like, Really? I've been working on the internet for a better solution because I thought maybe you just hadn't found a technology that would have made this easier." And then he was like, "You know what? I looked around and there doesn't seem to be a better solution for this." So that is the very quick genesis of what we called True Prep originally, that we rebranded as Juno here last summer. But okay, I see the numbers. Looks like we're starting to get to steady state. So again, Dave Hayes, founder of Juno. I'm here with Jack Flitcroft, who's co-founder and our head of AI. And just a couple quick things, and I'll let Jack introduce himself as well, is you can use the Q&A or chat. We're going to have Tanishka from our team, who's also kind of managing that. So if you guys have questions, feel free to use that. We're going to spend probably about 45 minutes going through what we want to go through, and we'll leave some time for Q&A at the end. We also will take questions in the middle. It's going to be up to Tanishka what she wants to break in and ask as we go through it. And the goal today is to cover preparer and the binder. So we're just going to start with those two things. We're trying to break out some of this content so that we can give you guys a really good like Juno 201 as you get into tax season here. But Jack, you want to say hello, introduce yourself a
Yeah.
little bit? Maybe we start with that.
No, absolutely. Hey, welcome everybody. I'm Jack Flitcroft. I know David is the face of the operations and everything, but I've been working in the background here to build Juno up to what it is today. It has been a really exciting journey. I never thought I would end up in the tax space, which is interesting. I would imagine a lot of you probably felt that same way. But what's a lot of fun is my job has really just turned into getting to meet all of you guys, getting to learn about the problems that you're facing, and then trying to solve them. And so here today to kind of give a little bit of insight into how the AI works in the background, really with the goal of like trust and transparency. You know, Juno's not perfect and everything like that. And so I want to go through how it works, what the pitfalls are, what we do well at, and everything like that. And yeah, great to meet everybody. I'd love to hopefully meet some of you afterwards and hear your feedback and other thoughts you have on Juno.
Yeah, perfect. I love seeing where people are coming in from. I'm based out of San Diego. Jack is uh, outside of Milwaukee. And so our team's all over the place. We do have offices in Philadelphia, and San Diego is kind of where the primary folks are. And then our engineers are everywhere, finding good AI engineers these days. You don't want to have them in Philly necessarily because it's a pretty unique skill set. So we do have those people spread out all over the place. But a big East Coast, West Coast, and then Midwest hub as well for our team. And we've grown quite a bit just in the last, we really announced this in August. And so it's been 5 months. And in that time, we've added something like, close to 400 firms here on our platform. And I just want to start with a little bit of like good news here as we get into tax season. Doing a tax return has been incredibly manual work for small and mid-sized firms. SurePrep was really the only tool that could do automated data extraction as of probably 12 months ago, even I would say. And then there's like little tools like ProConnect and Listert have like a little tool built in, but it didn't do any of the complex forms. And so we spend a huge amount of our tax prep time, typing in numbers and then creating duplication of work in order to make sure that that's done accurately, right? Like create a work paper and then annotate a PDF and have a second person go back and review all the numbers that they put in. And we were doing the best we can with the tools that we had, but there was a moment where I watched, like, I think it was GPT 3.5. Jack, you can keep me honest on that one if it was three or something. I don't remember which version it was, but they did a tax return on stage, and I thought, like, well, my multi-million dollar practice is probably worth $0 if this thing works out of the box. Now, I also hated SurePrep, by the way. That's the real quick motto when I brought Jack on was like, this company just sold for $500 million and it's the worst product. I literally can't stand it. We got to be able to do better than this. So if we do that, I know there's a business there. And I knew for even my small firm, it was going to be six figures of additional profit that we could have. And I say this with endearment. My people at my practice, I literally just sold it a couple weeks ago, but have run it for a decade. And so I am a practitioner. I'm a CPA, dealt with high wealth individuals, typical complexity that I think almost everybody on this call has. Um, and for me, I'll give you the very short version, but COVID hit, my people all left the Bay Area. If you're making like 80 to $100,000 as a tax preparer, then you still live with your girlfriend or your parents or something like that in the Bay Area. Like, you're definitely not living by yourself. And so when COVID hit, they all left. And when things started to open back up, I saw turnover because many of them had like left the area, and then we went virtual as a firm. And very long story short, I was really struggling to recruit people, especially into my junior roles, into the tax preparer role. And so I was looking at the technology. How do we automate this? I looked at SurePrep. I was like, okay, this isn't what I want. It doesn't even work with my tax software, first of all, using ProConnect. And secondly, it was like really clunky in certain ways. And I don't want to spend a lot of time knocking any other competitor because they've got a good team, I'm sure, working on that. But I felt like I needed something different for my practice. And at the time, SurePrep was also like $75 a return if you wanted the binder and everything that goes with it. So, I was like, okay, that's a lot for my practice. We need to come out with something that's easier to use, that is like has more modern technology and is more affordable for small and mid-sized firms. And I know I use the term affordable loosely here because it is really expensive software. But the promise here, as you guys are about to kick off tax season, I've used it for two tax seasons for my firm. And I don't know that I even count the tax season before last because it was a very different product. But last tax season, we saw more than a 50% reduction in the amount of time spent on a tax return. Like, that is an unbelievable impact on what is, for my practice, the largest expense for my business, as well as the largest bulk of time that we spend. And so I just want to say this: as you go into tax season, like, there's a lot of reason for optimism here, in terms of what it can do. And the product is much better today than it was last year when I saw that time savings. So I think my firm will see even greater time savings. In fact, like, I would never have sold it, except that Juno's growing so quickly that it really didn't make sense for me to try to split my time. But here's some interesting metrics too. Like, no one at my firm worked overtime last year, literally, which is really crazy. Think about that for just a second, like the impact on the seven or eight folks that I have at my firm. Um, we ran 55% net margins, which was up from like 30% the year before. And that was six figures of incremental profit. And by the way, that includes paying for Juno like a normal. We have different ownership of the companies. And so I pay for it like a normal customer. In fact, I signed at a higher price point than most of you guys did. As a matter of fact, that Jack owes me a refund, I think, based on what I paid last year. And especially if we consider how the product worked in January and February of last year. This is all pre-launch. Um, but we saw a huge impact there. And then I'll also say, like, one other thing as we get going here, because we're going to talk about roles and some of that, and I'm about to pull up and we'll jump into a demo here. But it also really helped my admins do more work so that when a preparer picked up work, it was closer to being like, the data entry was effectively done, or the majority of it. And so it allowed us to work more efficiently as a staff in some ways that are really important and interesting. And like, it's light years ahead of where it was in Q1 of last year. We took something like 15 to 20 demo kind of beta firms in, and God bless those folks for what they had to deal with in Q1 of last year. It was definitely, we were still working on that. That's why we hadn't like publicly launched it. But we're going into this tax season with a lot more strength, and just a huge amount of experience from running a few 100,000 documents last year. And I'm really, really excited about what's coming here with tax season. So With that, I will not drone on about this the whole time, but I think there's some reason for optimism for the folks here. This can really help you do more with less time. We got our returns turned around faster last year than we ever had in the past. Like we had been running a 2+ week lead time if people came in the core of tax season, and we dropped that to about a week last year. And I think this year it's probably going to be even shorter than that. It might be 3 or 4 days, which is a better customer experience. We drafted our customer delivery letters with Juno, which saved us additional time. Obviously, did the work papers as well as extracted the data, and so we had better accuracy, better turnaround time, and more advisory provided with the returns. So just from a customer perspective or a client perspective, I think we did a much better job as a firm for them using this tool. So it's pretty cool when you can, drive more profit and do a better job for your clients. I think that's a really good outcome. The last quick thing I'll say, I say this quite a bit, but like the reason people work with accountants instead of using TurboTax is for the advice that they receive and the assurance of knowing that it's done correctly. So if this product can help us in those ways, it's going to have a meaningful impact on how well you do as a professional and the industry, which is our goal. We could have tried to build a TurboTax for consumers. We chose to start here, one, because of where AI is at and that it's really, really good, but not perfect. And two, because I really have a passion for this industry and the profession and seeing it continue to thrive. So with that, I think that's plenty of preamble here for us. Let me pull up. I'm going to share my screen here, and I'll go through the application first. So let me start in Juno here. And so we're going to cover Preparer and the binder. I'm going to have Jack talk a little bit about like some of the design and the AI pieces behind the scenes on this. And then I'm going to give the overview and how it works in a practice. This isn't meant to be like a sales, you guys are all customers actually who are on here. So this isn't meant to be salesy. This is meant to be like, how do we use this as we get into tax season most effectively? So obviously you're welcome to hit the Q&A and ask questions, or you can use chat as well if you have specific questions. But I'm going to create a new preparation here, and I'm going to run a real preparation. So I'm just going to create a new client, make up a name here. We always use some form of Daisy Duck. I'm going to use double X Daisy Duck. We use this for testing as well. So you'll see like 600 Daisy Ducks in here. But Daisy at Juno.tax. Sorry, I can't talk and type at the same time. Okay, so I'm going to enter the information. If you connect with your tax software, which all of you should already be connected with your tax software, you should have an entire client list already built. I'm just creating a new one so you guys can see that I'm actually processing the documents here. I'm going to do 24 because I have 24 source documents, so I don't get an error on every single one. And then you get to this screen, which is where you're going to upload the documents. My team last year dragged and dropped every single thing in here, and you can save a ton of time dragging and dropping. The dragging and dropping really only takes a couple minutes, and the reality is like when I have a completed organizer, this is I want to like pause on this for just a moment for everyone to think about. Whoever is the person that's checking when you have a completed organizer is most of the time, depending on the practice management that you're using, downloading all of those documents when it's ready to go, ready to be prepared, and they're moving them somewhere else, right? And so we have integrations with Smart Vault and Box, and we also have an integration with TaxDome, which I'll show you here in just a second, where you would push the files in. But I'm going to drag and drop today just so I can show you guys kind of what that looks like. From a TaxDome perspective, you are going to have like this send to tax software up here in your tabs in the client documents area. And when you hit it, this is a sign up flow. So this would only happen when you first sign up. You're going to see this, which is basically like you can select the documents that you want to send over. And then you hit send to Juno, and off it goes, and it's going to automatically map as well. If you're dragging and dropping, you're going to hit this button and you're going to be able to drag things in here. And I'm going to use Cheryl, I think, as going through this morning, has the best assortment of things that I want to show you guys. So I'm bringing in a bunch of documents here. And the first thing I'll say is like, I would recommend bringing in all of the source documents that somebody sends. Our system can decide if it's going to process that document or not. And depending on the structure of your firm, I think it's more work than it's worth. And to be honest, like a fair amount of overhead to tell your like whoever's processing these documents, it could be an admin, it could be an intern, it could be an entry level preparer, it could be a lot of different folks. We have really big firms and we have really small firms. Um, but my point here is like, I don't think there needs to be a lot of thought that goes into what you upload. You should just throw everything in here basically and let the system decide. And I'll show you some examples of this. These are processing. I'm going to do this in real time. Like typically this takes 2 or 3 minutes to process this. And I've uploaded like multiple Schedule Cs. I've uploaded K1 here. That's a pretty complex K1. I've uploaded a 1099 SSA, like normal, a few normal documents, a couple NECs. This is just an assortment of documents. So this would be like, at least for my practice, a pretty typical assortment of documents. And you'll see it's going to knock through here and it's going to refresh every few seconds. And it's going to tell me what's ready for review. One comment I'll make here is I'm going to get a lot more awaiting reviews than you guys will on a typical client because I'm using documents where the client name is blacked out. And so therefore it triggers this on the taxpayer versus spouse. So I'm going to review a couple of these. You can see the only thing I need to review here is taxpayer versus spouse. And it's because I'm using a totally generic name. We've overwritten the name here. And so it doesn't know who's like the taxpayer or the spouse. But I can quickly validate these things here by just going in and hitting the validate button. But again, like you typically are going to see some sort of exception on something like 10 to 20% of your documents. I guess, Jack, do you want to give some overall, like, talk a little bit about extraction
Yeah,
as I go
absolutely.
through these? Yeah.
So what fundamentally we built this for was to be able to ingest anything, which we, in a way, that shoots ourselves in the foot a little bit because it makes it difficult on you guys knowing what we can do well with and what we can't. But ultimately, the problem is if we were to require you to upload documents entirely separately, you can't have 1099s together, you can't have W-2s, mix and match and things like that. It makes your job so much more difficult to use Juno. So what happens in the background is we run it through a classification phase. It's going to figure out what document type it is and then figure out what tax forms are in there of that document type. After that, it's going to go and do its data extraction. But what you'll find is that when you get to these ultra complex documents, say if you have a Schedule E, like an Excel spreadsheet that's got 12 different tabs for 12 different, rental properties, it's going to struggle there. And the way that I would present this is just think about it as a junior reviewer or a junior preparer as far as how they might understand this context. And really what AI comes down to, like modern AI is really, really good. When you combine it with traditional OCR tools, which is what we do in the background, it gets really, really good at extracting that data very accurately. The problem comes in when you have missing context, right? And I actually see a couple of questions about like why do we need email and phone numbers and things like that. It's because that actually helps us contextualize the information that we're seeing, especially as we go into the organizer and some of our products later down the line. But with Preparer and the data extraction, what Dave was just showing you earlier, it's going to flag out that filing type, right? It's not going to know if it's taxpayer or spouse because the names mismatch. But there's little basic things like that. So if I upload a Schedule C that's got really sparse data on there, it might have some numbers about things that the business might have sold or had purchased, but it doesn't give a good description as to why. You might see some misclassifications. And another pitfall to look out for is just as you're working with this too, some firms we know have different processes for things, right? So Dave's got the Schedule C up here. We've got an other income section on the left. And some firms prefer that some data goes in other income versus in this one particular case, we actually like to put it in this category, right? Oftentimes, these are not material to the actual return, but it's about aligning with your process. And so, what we always recommend to firms is, the AI is going to do what it does best, which is match, this value to this value, and it's going to match them whatever matches the close semantically. It doesn't know your process. So if you want it to know your process, then ensure that you're going through that up ahead of time and adding in, hey, this is other income dash, bank charges or something like that, right? Just to give it the best context possible. And that's really where the future of Juno is going, is in full context awareness of your client specific information, your firm specific processes, and things like that. So that way, our system isn't just extracting information, but it's actually adjusting the way it's behaving towards your process.
Yeah, and so I'll echo that just a little bit. We take, and I'll show you guys what I uploaded here. on this particular one. Let me find this for Cheryl. Okay, so I have a schedule of expenses. I uploaded two very different Schedule C documents. This would be one of the ones. We'll look at this here in just a second. And you can see like a bunch of different columns here that are coming in. This is just a random template that someone used here. And then the other one, oh, sorry, this is a work paper. Let me grab, I think I uploaded a second. Cheryl Botanicals, this one. All right. So the other one was an NEC for this botanicals thing. And you can upload like an NEC can be moved into a Schedule C as well. And you can upload any sort of like what to say it simply for this is the other P&L, excuse me. So here you can see like this is the other one. This would come out of QuickBooks, right? And so long story short, the a summary document is going to work best. The reason for that is, well, one, it's much, much easier to make sure that the AI has appropriately extracted that information. We do force review on any Schedule C or Schedule E, and anything I'm saying about a Schedule C, you could basically extrapolate to a Schedule E as well for rental properties. By the way, also a Schedule F. But the way this is designed to work is to take like any unstructured data and like structure it for you. And but we do want you to look at those things just to make sure that it's appropriately placed in those categories because we're taking in less structured data than like an IRS form. So we're just more likely to have, like Jack was saying, we're using semantic matching. Well, with that, like you're just less likely to get the perfect outcome that you would want as an accountant. These are areas where you're going to be spending a little bit of time. Like the AI is going to do all the work of like extracting the 60 lines or whatever it might be, but you're also going to be overseeing it. So I'll give you a couple examples on a Schedule C or a Schedule E. Sometimes I'm going to go in here and there's going to be like new assets, right? So if I look at like supplies, well, probably a bad example if it's supplies, or if I look at other expenses, let me just see if there's anything. Here you go. Like equipment we lease. Okay, so it's a lease, right? This can be expensed, but or typically can be expensed. It does depend on the type of lease. But that being said, like someone might put equipment in here that they purchased, and then I have to take this, delete it out, and go put that in their fixed asset module. So my point is just that there needs to be human oversight on some of these forms. The same would be true on a rental property. If they said like new roof, $80,000, I've got to go in there, and that's why we want people to review these particular forms because there's less structured data. You're more likely to get information that needs review. And Jack kind of alluded to that when he was talking about context. So it's going to be really important for a really long time to have a human going through and reviewing certain things. And our system is designed to kind of help you focus on what needs review. So as an example, like when I go into these other forms, okay, so here's a W-2 that's coming in. And you can see like I validated all the forms. Now I can still look at every single piece that's been validated here, and I can oversee or change those numbers if I see that appropriate. Like I've got California SDI here, 3681. If I zoom in on this guy, oops, bear with me here. I can see the 3681 right here, right there. And so I can go through all of these and validate them all. If our system says it's validated, we have high confidence that we've extracted the right information. And then if we don't, we flag it for review. And actually, like before you even export, it'll say like you haven't validated all the information. So this is meant to be like very simple to follow, and it makes it faster because it's telling you what needs to be reviewed. Like I can review this in just a few seconds. Okay, taxpayer, great. And again, like we're using anonymous names, and so it does tend to flag a lot more than you're likely to see. But this one, here's a good example. Like this is flagging, I don't even know why, but it's flagging like, oh, actually now I know why because I'm looking at them. The like, your TIN and some of these things actually are well, this one's X'd out. But that being said, like it's not doesn't have great like confidence basically on these values. And so I'm going to go through here and look like the NEC is what I care about the most, like 14220.5. That's correct. You'll notice like if it says false, it means the box is not checked. And then I can see like that I want it's got like that's the primary thing coming off this form, basically, right? So I know that it's got the right information that's going to impact the tax return. I can validate that form, and it just takes a couple minutes to go through. And while I'm doing this, and I want to talk about K1s as well, but I can extract even on a pretty basic return. You'll actually see a large number of values that get extracted. Like people don't realize how many pieces of information come off these pretty basic forms. We typically will see like 100 or 200 fields on even a very basic return that are coming off and getting validated in different ways. So that's a big part of the time savings that you'll see there. And I'll show you that in just a second, how many we just extracted. And we've been talking, but it's been something like maybe 10 minutes total here. Would have been two or three if we had just been plugging through it. So the other thing I want to talk about is K1s a little bit. And we did a whole session on K1X, just announcing this last week. And so right now we're extracting a huge amount of information off the K1. Page one for federal and state. It's not always page one. Sometimes there's a cover letter. Oftentimes, actually, there's a cover letter. But I'm going to call it page one just for simplicity here, because you guys probably know what I mean. Um, Really, really good at extracting this at the federal and the state level. We're going to push those fields into your tax software. Sometimes with certain tax software, we don't even have a place to put some of the data that we're extracting. And I'll show you that in the binder momentarily, especially on a K1 that comes into account, particularly on footnotes. Um, but that being said, we just announced this partnership with K1X. Those guys have built the most advanced models for extracting data accurately from K1s. They started from, I think it was Crow that they came out of, or CohnReznick, I forget which one it was, but one of the really, really big firms. They started with a huge amount of information. They've been around for 8 years since they rolled out of that firm, and they work with like three of the big four, and a bunch of the top 100. I think over half of the top 100. So we're bringing that technology into Juno, and we're not charging for it because we wanted you guys to have a really great experience. And now we can manage really complex K1s. So I'll here on validation, you can see again, it's like taxpayer versus spouse that's getting validated. This is a pretty simple one in terms of at least page one. And then I do have some footnotes. So I'm going to show you what this looks like in the work paper. But Jack, do you want to talk a little bit about some of the
Yeah.
scope of what we do with K1s now?
So, and real quick, just to answer a couple of questions that I see. So, we do handwritten notes very well. The beauty of the system here is that it's going to combine traditional OCR with some more modern AI systems out there. So, you're going to get the benefit of what OCR has been really good at in the past, which is, you've got great consistency with reading characters, and you're always going to capture the right information. The problem that OCR runs into is, again, context. When data is spread between multiple pages, the K1 here is actually a really great example. For box 17, we can see we have to go down to the statement here to see, hey, there's actually three description codes. There's AC, two AJs, then you've got the numbers corresponding with that. So, combining these two things together actually creates a really cohesive system. That is where we see a little bit of fun behavior sometimes, I'm going to call it. So on that 1099 that Dave had pulled up earlier, sometimes the system actually is going to flag out a bunch of different things because what it is seeing and what the OCR is seeing might not relate correctly. And really, the way that we built this was to ensure that any discrepancy, any low confidence or unconfidence within the system is going to be brought to you to review. Obviously, we need to be cognizant about how much information we're bringing up to review the data before it goes into the tax software. But really, the beauty of this is that it is removing review altogether almost of the actual data entry that you don't need to do anymore, right? Normally, you would have one person enter the data and you'd have to have a second person read it because humans are 98% accurate. We're 99.9% accurate. So we're actually better than the humans that you're probably working with. Um, and then on the K1s here, what's really cool is using K1X, we can handle all the states. We can handle the K3s, the QBI statements, the UBTI, and different things like that. And it's going to have an incredibly high accuracy. One thing that we've just struggled with in the past is working with K1s. They're obviously a very complex form. And like I said, that context is all there. But with K1s, we get to a different problem called context explosion, right? You're trying to parse and like review so much information at once because these things can be massive pages, massive number of pages. And so K1X has built a really great product, and we're really excited to be able to bring this in and down towards some smaller firms.
Yeah, absolutely. And so when Jack says handle, just want to clarify. there, it's a good point of like, what do we handle basically, right? What forms do we extract and push into your tax software? And the quick answer is like, we do the vast majority of IRS standardized forms, right? So like brokerage statements, which actually aren't standardized, but we can do all of them anyways. 1099s of every sort, DIV, INT, Social Security, NEC, miscellaneous, like I'm probably missing a whole bunch there, long-term care, things like that. And then we can also take an organizer. We don't extract the information and push it into your tax software, with the exception of charitable contributions and medical expenses. We will start to do more probably on that front as we go through tax season, but we only take limited information out of the organizer, and then we will do K1s as well and the footnotes associated with K1s. Now there's a second piece though, which is like, what can we extract and validate, and what do we enter into your tax software? And so, at a very high level, without boring you guys, I would say like we've taken thousands and thousands of fields from those forms and mapped them into each individual tax software. ProConnect and Lacert and Drake and UltraTax, and Access are the ones that we support today. And we support an integration with all of those. They're all unique integrations because of the way you have to connect to each software is different. But we've mapped like thousands of fields to each of those pieces of software, and so you can imagine the complexity sometimes of like the software can actually change, and you don't get notice. I don't know about you guys, but like, I've never actually had a note from ProConnect that they pushed an update and like emailed it to me, other than when they released the 2025 software. But they do, especially this time of year, almost every day, they're actually changing their software in certain ways as they release the 2025 forms. And oftentimes it impacts 2024 as well. So we're like, we have a QA system and a team that both are watching that continuously, which is pretty hard work. But that being said, like, we have pre-mapped. We know that like when you see a W-2 box 12 needs to go here in ProConnect. And we also know that if the person is in New York and they have out of state income, that we need to take the total of state income and report it as New York income. So make that adjustment and then put it in Lacert or ProConnect, with a code S as an example. And also add back healthcare if it's on the W-2 in certain circumstances. So we do have some like very complex logic that happens behind the scenes in how we map to your tax software. So for the most part, we can be pretty straightforward. Box 12 on the W-2 goes here in ProConnect, but there are some times where we have like much more complex functionality, and that's why we use a binder to tell you what we've done. Like, the reason you create a work paper is to understand all of the decisions that have been made and what has been reviewed, to like demonstrate the work, that the preparer originally put into your tax return. Well, now Juno is the preparer for part of your tax return. And so we have built this work paper functionality to basically make it like unbelievably clear to you what we have extracted and what we have pushed into your tax software, and then any decisions that got made along the way. So let me zoom in on this just a little bit. This is a really important piece of like how this system is designed to work with you. So here's an interesting example. Like this NEC, we've extracted the state income for California, but haven't like that hasn't been extracted, hasn't been pushed into the tax software. So, and there's a specific reason for that. Like, we don't always push in state specific income. Depends on the form. Basically, we do it on most forms, but we don't always put the state if it's like the federal. Because that person might be reporting in a different, they might be reporting in a different state. So there are times like on an NEC where we are not going to put the state in, because we are assuming that you're going to have this on a Schedule C or another income, and you would allocate the state. You wouldn't necessarily hard code the state, if that makes sense. You'd let the state allocation follow which state they're filing in, if that makes sense. Like, let me say it in a ProConnect way. I just put it in the main field. I don't put in the specific state on this form, because if they live in Mississippi, I need to evaluate where the nexus is of that income. So it's telling me what it has and has not done. And a much more explicit example would be basically, I think, let me use let me use the K1 here, actually, I think, which will be on page two. Okay, so on the K1, you're going to see a lot of these on a K1 because we're extracting data from the footnotes. But oftentimes, footnote data, and I'm looking at this area right here, the footnote data is like communication about the nature of that income that doesn't always get put directly into your tax software the way it's presented in the statements. And secondarily, I will say we launched the K1X partnership, and now we extract like thousands of fields off of a K1, not just page one, but like all the pages. And we haven't yet mapped all of those fields into the tax software. We're going to be expanding the fields that we map automatically into your tax software over the next, few weeks and a couple months. It takes a while for K1s to come in, at least the complex ones. And so we'll be working on that as fast as we can, but we don't have a ton of data right now to make sure that we're getting the most relevant fields, if you will. We want to kind of be able to prioritize that. But my point here is that if we don't push it into your tax software, it is going to be listed in this checklist, basically for you to review. And there will always be, like, we're never going to enter all of this information into your tax software because, to be honest with you, whether it's ProConnect or Drake or Access or whatever, they don't have a place for all of this information to go. Like, some of these are adjustments that need to be made to other fields. So what we do here is we put in page one of the federal and the state, and then we make a note of any other relevant information that we see on that form that has not been put into your tax software. And that becomes like a checklist for the preparer, right? And the reviewer to see to make sure you've made the right adjustments based on that information. Jack, is that anything you want to add there in terms of K1s with the work paper?
Yeah, well, K1s, and I'll expand it to the greater number of forms. I'm reading some of the chat here as well, and just want to answer a couple of questions here. So this is like probably the primary focus area that Juno is heading towards, right? We've done what we believe to be a really great job of getting, on any tax return between 60 and 80% of the data entry done. But really, it's that other percentage that we want to make sure you're aware of what's not maybe going in. So for instance, there was a question on, is Juno going to be supporting 1095A in the future? That's absolutely going to be a thing. But currently we don't. What we have this binder here for you, though, is it's going to call out the 1095A if it sees it within the documents. It's going to list out the data that it sees, just because that information is not going to flow into your tax software, but it is something that it did see on the documents. We're also going to be doing this for organizer information, and we will begin to import some of the organizer data as well, so you won't have to set up that information going forward. And then as we get into deductions and Schedule A information, I just want to make a really quick correction. I know Dave, actually, this is such a new update. We do charitable contributions now, fun fact, but we're also going to start doing other Schedule A items as well. But the point being is that the binder here is really to give you a tax plan of what you need to do to finish the preparation. Yes, Juno has done the bulk of the data entry, but there are some outlier items. There's some credits and deductions that might be found on the organizer. There's Schedule A information, which can come in as receipts, which sometimes the system will actually just kick right out to you if it's a really bad receipt and it's not sure how to categorize this, because there's sometimes work that the human needs to be aware of and doing, right? And so without full context in the client, we err on the side of caution where we are going to basically give you a tax plan of what our system decided it's not going to do automatically. And that's going to be up to you to complete. But again, that's going to include forms that Juno doesn't support. It's going to include organizer information that Juno doesn't currently support. It's going to include credits and deductions that we might see that might apply and things like that. And we're also going to start giving you recommended actions on these things as well, because like Dave had mentioned, depending on the tax software, some things matter and some things actually don't. On the K1, a lot of these codes don't actually mean anything, right? The K1 is
Yeah.
essentially the business return. And so it's only going to input the information that's applicable to the individual, but there's still going to be a bunch of other information on there that it's not going to input, right? So we're just ensuring that we give you all the relevant information here so you're not missing anything.
Yeah. So an example would be like the state ID on a 1099 NEC. There's not always a place for this information. Like, I actually don't think ProConnect has a place for this. So I'm mapped to ProConnect. This is the binder actually knows which tax software that you're connected to, and it's already telling you where it can place data. So there's like no place for a state ID in ProConnect. on a 1099 NEC. There's a federal EIN, but there's not a state ID. And so that's not relevant information. So I can make a comment on that or I can check it off, right? If I want to do that separately, I can check it off there. Oops, sorry, don't want that last check mark. Right. And so I can actually go through if I want to and annotate this automatically. I've got these little tools up here. But to Jack's point, the goal here is to like really over communicate what the system is doing. And I just want to say out loud that like though this is a pretty easy path to follow, right? Like it's designed to be pretty simple. And I had my staff do it last year, and we didn't have a help center, and we didn't have boot camp, and we didn't have any of these resources. And my staff was able to like still understand how the system was working pretty simply. And we actually didn't even have work papers back then. We had our Excel work paper, but not this binder. And so we're trying to be explicit, but there's still back and forth between the human and the AI system, and that's really important actually. In order to get a good outcome, we want to be completely transparent with you on the decisions that the system is making all across the way, and particularly in cases where we don't enter information that we're seeing. So even on, I don't know if W-2 is probably a bad example, but on a K1 footnote, I don't know, let's pick one of these. Page 6, US source sales amounts versus foreign, I would presume here in the footnote, right? Like offhand, I don't know where this information would go in ProConnect. I actually don't think this is likely to be relevant information that needs to be entered into ProConnect. But I do want to know if Juno sees something in the footnotes that it thinks might be relevant to the tax return. As we go through time, like this will narrow this down because we're going to expand the fields that we're supporting. Although realistically, I think we're probably already at something like 90 or 95% of the fields that we will support ever, because we map so many of the possible fields on most of these forms. The one exception being the footnotes of the K1s. But that being said, and the 1095A, by the way, thank you for bringing that up, because I have been telling the team that's got to be a priority sooner rather than later. And there's other little forms. I don't think we'll do a bunch of new forms this year, but there's like the W2G that we don't support. I'm trying to think of the other ones that we get questions about. There's just like a few on that list, and I think the 1095A is the one that I think is really more pressing. But that being said, the system has to tell you what it did and did not do, and then basically, allow the human to go in and finish the last 5 or 10% of the return, depending on what that is. So what we don't do also off the organizers, if they say they got married or they had a child that year, or they have an EV credit, or they sold their primary home, or they did a 1031 exchange on a rental property. We're not doing those things right now. Or if there are basis adjustments on like an RSU, where the basis is flowing in from the W-2, but it's not reported on the brokerage statement. That type of thing is going to be a human adjustment. And I just want to say out loud that like it's going to be a human adjustment for a really long time. We can do all of the standardized data entry that is, something that we have already knocked out the majority of, but we'll continue to expand our scope on. But those other things that I mentioned, with a couple exceptions, like if they say they had a child or got married, that is actually something we'll probably do in the next year or 2 years. But on the RSU example, I just want to give you guys some context. Okay, it's flowing in off the W-2, and I actually could probably pull that off the W-2. We could do that, in fact, and I could try to map that to like an E-Trade statement in the case where, again, like this is RSUs and they've got basis kind of is reported as income on the W-2. But the information I don't have, that I actually don't think we're ever really going to be able to solve for, is which stock did they sell from that? Did they sell all of their stock? Was it just from this year's W-2? Was it from the prior year's W-2? They have other basis coming in from a prior year. And at least in the examples that I've seen, unless they do a better job of reporting on the brokerage statement, I can't tell where that basis should be allocated, right? How much basis should be used for the stock sale that I have. And so in that scenario, you have to have a human, and not just today. You're going to have a human for a really long time, like maybe forever, because it's multi-period. It relies on the judgment of the accountant, and it depends on what they allocated last year as basis if they did the same sale last year. So there are things that AI systems are just not going to be able to solve, probably ever, right? So our goal is not to get to 100%, it's to get to 95 or 97 or something like that percent of the data entry on the tax return, but do it with incredible accuracy and transparency. And we're playing around. If you guys have, this is a point in the show where I always tell people, please give us your feedback so we can continue to evolve and improve in what we're doing. We love getting feedback from our customers. It's really helpful for us. It makes our product better. There are times where we just can't do something, and we'll be open about that. But I'd rather know if there's something you think that we could do. When I get that type of feedback, what I'll typically do is figure out if the system has enough information to do something with 100% accuracy. So I'll give you a funny example. In the case where someone has a child that year, the reality is they almost never give me like the date of birth and the social security number all in one go. I have to kind of go back and forth there. Gathering context from your clients is still going to be a human use case for quite some time. But also, if I don't have the date of birth, like I don't know if that child was born, I know that they fill out the tax, they fill out the organizer in January or February typically, and that child could have been born in January or February of this tax year, meaning it doesn't impact last year's tax return. But an AI system, if we just turn that on to fire and add a dependent every time we see a dependent there, then we would definitely want to have some controls in place to make sure that we're not putting the wrong information in a tax return. A similar example that's a little bit counterintuitive is like we don't overwrite the basis information on a K1 or the number of shares on a K1. And so you can actually see that right here if you see the beginning and ending shares on this. And you can see that right here. And basically the reason for that is sometimes there is different information that you've made adjustments for over the years on basis, and I don't want to overwrite that information. So if I overwrite like the beginning balance in a capital account, but you made adjustments last year to that, that could lead to an error on the tax return. And so generally speaking, I want to leave that field because it's a carryover from the prior year, and then let you calculate ending basis. Oftentimes, if there's not new capital going into that business, it's going to be the same from year to year, but I don't want to overwrite it because in general, if you've made adjustments, we want to make sure that we're not deleting that information out of your customer's file and making you go back to a prior year return. So there are certain things that we choose not to overwrite, and having this checklist will help communicate with you on what has been overwritten and not. The last quick thing I'll say here on the organizer, and then we'll pause for Q&A, is there's also all the original source documents, right? So I've got all the pages of the source documents here. They're put in order of the type of information that you're bringing in. So you can see the W-2, the 1099 SSA, the K-1. It's got income and then deductions, basically. And it's in the order that you would find it on the tax return. But it's all of the original source documents in here. So you can see there's a whole slew of these that I brought in. And it's also got like on a 1098, you're going to map it to Schedule E or Schedule A, and then it's going to put it in the right place based on the way the tax return presents. So we've done a lot of work to like map this to your processes. But I want to say out loud that like using Juno to automate tax preparation is a new process overall, and that's why we want to have plenty of resources available to you and your staff to help you guys work really efficiently in the product. And if you're not already doing real tax returns, then I would recommend you even run through some last year's tax returns and at least go through the validation piece of it so that you can kind of understand how this works in more detail. But Jack, anything else we missed before we move over to Q&A?
Yeah, no, I want to just go over some other pointers here, just as far as how the process works. I know because we've talked really in depth on a few things. So the general flow here, as far as the binder, as how the binder works within this process, is you upload your documents and you export them into the tax software. Obviously, that export piece is not what we showed today. We can't show that across all the 5 tax softwares at once. But each of you have, during your onboarding would have seen that process. The binder is then created for you. You can use this at any point in the process. Part of the reason why we built Juno was for small tax firms. And in doing that, one of the problems that we're trying to solve is how every single tax firm has a slightly different process. So the binder is available to you as soon as you upload documents. And if a client gives you a document a month later and you have to re-upload that document, it's going to be added into the existing binder. It won't even destroy any notations you've had. Everything is still going to be perfectly fine. It's just going to inject that new document in. You can then begin using the binder right away. And to the earlier point that I made, the piece that we're really attacking heavily here for you guys is going to be that checklist. This is the V1 of this, right? And I want everyone to just keep that in mind. Like Dave said, we take feedback really, really well and really seriously. So we have the Modern Tax Pros community. Please post there if you have any suggestions on this. We're aware it's a long checklist. A lot of these things are not like totally material to the return. Right now, we're giving you everything. But what we're gonna start doing is slimming that down, like Dave mentioned. And we're gonna start giving you actually like reviewable actions to this. And this is, I know we're not talking about advisor and reviewer on this call, but this is actually where advisor and reviewer start to supplement and help some of this data entry and give actual insights to the preparer system. So that way we can say, hey, here's a bunch of codes in the K1. These are what we pulled off. By the way, you don't have to do anything with these because this one means this means this means this. We're going to push that over to the side for now. However, there was a code in the K1 that I don't have any way to enter into the tax software because I need you to do this first, right? And we're going to give you that information. And then a couple of other things are, as I'm reading through here, as far as a manual flip goes, I just saw one comment from Noel. If you do have, like David mentioned earlier, after uploading a document, there are going to be some fields that just say this data does not get entered to tax software. For instance, the filing type status, I don't believe Lacert and ProConnect has, but CCH does. And instead on Lacert and ProConnect, it just has a different screen for that information. Um, and so what will happen is that will get flowing out to this organizer here. Anything that we pulled off that's not imported to the tax software will go at the top here. So you don't need like a manual flip. But what we're going to actually be building this into is the integration app. So after you push your data to the tax software, right after that step, we're going to give you the tax plan right there. It's going to be very different from the organizer checklist that you're seeing today. Like I said, it's going to have a list of recommended actions. It's going to pre-categorize where each of these things are. And it's going to be a much more digestible list. So that's going to be the version 2 of this. And like Dave said, as you guys have questions and feedback, please keep it coming because that only improves the product beyond what it is today.
Yeah, I'll give a couple quick examples of that. Like the example I gave about New York out of state wages would be one that a client brought up and said, hey, New York needs to be, there's a rule where they have to report the sum of all state wages basically as New York wages. So like we were just importing directly off the W-2, but that's not the right way to do it. So when you see those types of exceptional things, we took that feedback and actually built that into our product. We do get questions about transcripts. I have a comment, Joe. You and I can take that offline. I have some thoughts about transcripts. I wish they came out earlier than they do. That'd be super helpful for us. But that being said, yeah, if you guys have thoughts on additional information we could be extracting and other logic that you're seeing, what I don't want to do is push information to your tax software and have it be wrong. Because if someone doesn't catch that, I don't want to create an error on your return. So that being said, like that's why we don't necessarily do everything on the Schedule A that comes off an organizer, because we just can't be totally sure that it's correct. And we don't want to push information there if it's not correct. And that's why we don't do footnotes yet on the K1. We're still figuring out like, okay, what's our accuracy look like across these different documents with footnotes specifically, and which fields does it map to? And we have to know those things perfectly before we're going to turn on that functionality. And but all the time we get folks giving us feedback, like the 1095A is a good one. I've heard that quite a few times. Where you know if there's other things you think we can do, definitely let us know. We are always evaluating that. And then in terms of what's not extracted, Laura, there's two answers to that question. Tanishka, I don't know if you've got this handy, but you can list the documents that are supported, right, from our help center. There is an amazing help center, guys, out there. We have a whole bunch of articles. There's also live chat that you can use if you have questions in the app in the bottom right. You can click on the live chat button, and it's like a little Juno icon. So and then in terms of like the full list, Tanishka can link to that for you into the Help Center article there. But it's the vast majority of forms. And but the other answer I want to give you to that question is if we don't take something, we will literally tell you in the software like this is not supported. And in the work papers, we will tell you like this is an original source document, but nothing's been extracted from it. So there's two places that you can catch that. And again, like I'd rather have you tell your staff to throw everything in here even if the system does not process it, because there are certain things that we don't push into your tax software that we do use for reviewer, and the organizer would be the biggest example of that. So again, like we on the organizer, and I'll show you guys this tomorrow because we're going to do prep and review workflows, and I will show you export tomorrow as well. And by the way, we're recording this. We'll send it out to you guys afterwards. If you want to share it with your team, you're welcome to do that. Forward it as you see fit. But tomorrow we're going to do prep and review workflows. So I'll actually flow through like we'll skip the prep and detail what we just did today, but we will have a prep and we'll push it in, and then we'll talk about review. So export and review will be a lot of our time tomorrow that we'll spend, and I'll show you guys some things there. But you can skip things in export. In export, if something's not supported, obviously it's not going to export into the software. So it's there too. It's kind of like at every step we're communicating what we have extracted and what is being pushed into your tax software. But again, like we won't ever do everything because there just are these exceptional things that are unique and require I guess I would say are going to be almost impossible for an AI system to do automatically with the accuracy levels that we expect. If you go look at like invoices and stuff like that, you could be 97% accurate and be perfectly happy with the product. But in tax, like we really need to be unbelievably accurate so we don't have errors on the tax return. And one quick comment, I actually was going to make this. The number of fields that we had extracted, even with the group of documents that I uploaded, and again, like this is a pretty normal group of documents for me, was something like 400 fields of data. And so in like 3 minutes or 4 minutes, if we had not been talking here, we would have already had something like 300 to 400 fields of data pushed into the tax software. And so tax prep takes a lot longer than you think because you're doing so much data entry. You're also creating the work papers. You're also reorganizing the original source documents. So we're kind of doing that all in one fell swoop. Um,
We have
Dave,
okay.
I
Any other
want to take
questions
a
I
questions
missed,
second
here.
Jack or,
just
We,
or
to answer
Tanisha?
some of the questions
yeah.
here that have
Yeah.
shown up.
Yep.
So Eric, I see question on Schedule A. That's really interesting, by the way. We're going to be doing a similar thing that we do to the schedules, where the schedule information, it can come in, you can have like 100 lines for like one category, right, of all these different things, but you don't actually always enter all of those lines into ProConnect. You might enter a summary total. So we're going to be doing the same thing for the Schedule A here, and that should solve that issue. And then as far as is the binder affected after Juno has sent the extracted data to the tax software? No, we don't do anything to the binder. Like I said, the binder is built and it's built to be used after the data is already sent to the tax software. So it's going to give you that checklist of things that it didn't import. You can use the binder earlier. The binder is accessible on that page after you upload the data. It's where you get the review form on everything. It's right in the top right corner. You just click that and open it up. And then scrolling down here, um, yeah, Dave, could you actually show where that binder is again? Just I think we went kind of
Sure,
fast.
where the binder is. Yep.
Yeah,
Hold on
just
one
where it
second.
is.
Yep. Okay, perfect. Got it here in Chrome. Boom. Binders up here. View bookmark PDF binder.
Yep. And like Dave mentioned, we're going to also be placing this, or like I had mentioned earlier, we're going to be placing the outstanding items here in the integration app after you import the data. So that way, your normal flow is going to be very rigid, where Juno is going to show you right away, hey, I imported all of this. You need to do this, though. And then you're good, and you can finish the whole preparation right there in just a few minutes. Um, and you can add data later on. You can import your data to the tax software multiple times. We are going to preset everything to skip that we have already entered, so you're not going to get multiple overwrites, just to answer a couple of those questions.
There's one question about what are the ideal documents to request from a Schedule C client. Um,
Yeah,
can it
any
handle
a summary of
spreadsheet?
any sort, a list of expenses,
Mhm.
or you could do a P&L from QuickBooks. We don't give a template because you don't need one of our templates, but anything that's a summary document, it can have different columns. One thing that doesn't work on a Schedule E because we've chosen not to support it right now is if they have like multiple properties that are each a column. And Jack, correct me if I'm wrong, but that was one that just came up a couple days ago. And just
Yep.
the we want to be thoughtful about how that information comes in. So it should be a summary document and it should be for, at this point at least, like we have to support multi-columns going into one P&L if you want to think about it that way. So the problem is on a Schedule E with the multi-column, they're actually going into completely different Schedule E's. And so it's like a really different challenging use case. That's one that I would like to support in the future, but we don't support at the moment. So if they have like totally separate properties and they're all different P&Ls on one sheet, it's not going to work. So you want a summary document of any sort. It could be a list of expenses, it could be a P&L, whatever they send you. It could actually be receipts as well, but that's much harder for the system to process and validate. I would kind of say like, if I got a bunch of receipts, I'd ask my tax preparer to make a summary document. And so think of us as like the tax preparer. Basically, it's like you should give us a summary document basically of those things, as opposed to a bunch of different, like a box full of receipts, basically, like I used to get from some clients.
Yeah, there's two more questions and then we can, go ahead and conclude the webinar. The first one is, does the 1099 NEC link in when you have the Schedule C schedules? Your previous, does the 1099 NEC link in when you have the Schedule C schedules you previously showed and the income amounts would duplicate each other?
No, they wouldn't duplicate each other. So what would happen is you would enter or you would drag and drop the 1099 NEC into Juno. It's going to process as a 1099 NEC. When you go to import it into the tax software, there's going to be a maps to column. And so you're going to select, it defaults to other income, but you're going to select Schedule C. If there's a pre-existing Schedule C there, you'll select which one you want it to go into. So that way you can match on the pro forma information. And it's just going to put that one number right in there. It's not going to duplicate it. Because like I said, we don't actually treat the NECs as a Schedule C as you drop them in, because not every NEC is a Schedule C. It could be other income, a miscellaneous form, for instance, could be Schedule A, C, or E, right? Or other income. So we don't really know off the bat when it comes in confidently. So that's where we keep you as the human in the loop. We're just going to treat it as a miscellaneous form or an NEC form, and then you're going to choose where it goes, and it won't duplicate at all.
Great. Yep. And then there's one more question. Do you have a best practice on importing Schedule A deductions? We get it on the organizer filed in and sometimes documents. Can Juno handle Schedule A itemizations from the tax organizer sheets if that's how it's provided?
Yeah, I'd recommend separating them. And that's just a general recommendation. To be honest, depending on the format of the document you have, it might work completely fine. So if you have a specific page on your organizer that's just like Schedule A deductions, basically all listed out, it will very likely pull that one page off and recognize that that's Schedule A. If you, though, have that mixed with like other questions on the organizer, we don't classify one page as two different things. So it's going to either call it an organizer or it's going to think that that's Schedule A information. And so in general, like with Juno, yes, we can handle one document that's got everything. I would generally recommend separating things out if you start to run into issues with it. Like I said, this is one of those areas where I'd love to be able to answer you super confidently. I don't know what your format is. So what I just generally recommend is try it out, see how it does. And you'll start to learn and understand its behavior. And in general, just foolproof it if you can by separating those documents out from one another. Like I said, because if you have one page of everything, that's going to be probably too much compact information for AI to understand.
Yep, yep. Okay. And sorry, I said two.
One quick comment on that. Just if you guys see with organizers, like in TaxDome, we've got a standard format that's going to get pushed in. And most of you are probably using a standard format of some sort, would be my guess, if you're using any sort of like practice management or data collection software. It works really well in my experience across the different templates. But if you are seeing something that's not performing the way you think it should, give us feedback, right? And you can put that for product feedback. You can either email product feedback at juno.tax or you can put it out in Modern Tax Pros. Either place is totally fine. What I would normally ask for there, and you don't have to do it publicly in the forum if you don't want to, you can actually, just email to product feedback, but maybe an example of an organizer so we could look at what's working and what's not on that form. I do think we will probably do some training around specific organizer formats as we go through tax season to make that more accurate over time. But it really just depends on where you're bringing it in from. So that's something that we'll keep an eye on. And I think as we go through tax season, we're going to expand the functionality coming off of, coming of what data comes off an organizer. And if you
Uh,
guys have other questions or other feedback, that's probably a good general piece of advice. Of like, you can email support@juno.tax if you have a support question. If something's not working properly, then definitely hit those guys. They respond within 15 minutes. We hire US-based accountants. We have over and over, we're not trying to like offshore and make that like a call center that doesn't give you great service. We're really, really passionate about making sure we do support well. Or you can give product feedback at productfeedback.juno.tax, at juno.tax, or you can look in the help center for answers to some of your questions as well. You can live chat, like you can get us 100 different ways. Our goal is to be as available as possible. Please do send that feedback for us. It's really helpful.
Yep.
And we'll
And
go back through if we missed any questions. We'll go back through this after and try to respond to those as well.
I really want to emphasize that again, we've got the Modern Tax Pros channel, the community for everybody. You'll see me, I'm in there. I love to talk with you guys about this stuff. The one thing, I mean, shoot, I should probably take the EA exam at this point. I feel like I've learned enough about tax, but genuinely love to talk with you guys. I'd be happy to jump on one-on-one calls even, especially around new product development and things like that we're designing. I saw a couple of questions around that. And Tanishka, maybe if you can paste how to sign up for Modern Tax Pros in the chat here. That'd be really great too for these folks. But yeah, really, we build for your guys' feedback. Some of our earliest customers, you can talk with them. They'll support that as well. They'll tell you how much we listen because really, this is such a cool community of people. Genuinely, I've worked in multiple other industries before. I've never worked in an industry where people give you so much thought and feedback around what you're building. And it's so unbelievably useful. I'm more than happy to take a call with anybody if they'd like.
Perfect. And I know we're a bit over time. We will wrap. Let's wrap it up here. We'll have more tomorrow. We'll give time for Q&A tomorrow as well. Tomorrow we're going to go through the preparation and review workflows. So meaning like we'll skip data extraction, we'll get right into export and then reviewer and how to use that as well. And then look at like the binder versus the completed tax returns. So we'll give you guys a really good idea there with like real anonymized tax returns as an example, so we can go through that and you can see the full circle. So thank you all for making the time. I appreciate there's still a couple hundred folks on here, which is fantastic. And yeah, if you guys have other questions, we'll take more tomorrow and we'll keep it rolling. And just really, again, appreciate the time in the middle of tax season.
yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much, guys.